Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs.
No.
Hi, everybody.
Yes.
It's great to be back.
And welcome to another podcast. And in every episode, we try to bring you resources, tools, strategies, tips and techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. And instead of going on to the usual preamble today, we're just going to go straight into welcoming our special guest, Giselle, who we've had on a couple of times before.
Yes.
Welcome, Giselle.
Hello, Phil. Hello, Sharon. How are you both?
Great, thanks, Giselle. Wonderful to have you back again. And I'm just thinking, if people haven't heard the previous podcasts with you on them, definite ones to go and, chase up again too.
Yeah. And you've got...
All of them are, not just me.
Well, yeah, okay, all of them, but just to know that, as a classroom teacher and teacher of Year 6-7, children students this year and for the last few years.
Yes, for a long time. I was trying to work it out with someone. I think I'm 18 years teaching, and I had only 1.5 years in between my two maternity leaves, where I taught a 4-5 class and knit art for a while.
Oh, that's right. I'm remembering this now, Giselle. Yes, of course.
Yeah, that was a bit of out of the comfort zone, but good to have a challenge. And so, but otherwise, all six, either straight 7 or 6-7 the whole time. Otherwise,
So
and just wonderful to have the perspective of a classroom teacher, and
yes.
Because you're in the day-to-day busyness, or we all are, but you're in that day-to-day busyness of having your ups and downs in your classroom.
Yes.
I'm laughing because that was today.
And it wasn't enough.
There were some highlights, yes, and we had not necessarily particularly with the students, but just that life of a teacher, that some of it, was a bit of a low point today.
Well, there's a whole lot of pressures on teachers, aren't there, with everything we've got to do besides,
being in front of the class.
Yeah, which is one of the most enjoyable part. But
and I think that was where this came from, because I'd put a lot of, I had some really key lessons today. I'd put a lot of work into preparing those lessons to be really something, and then just some other factors influenced whether those lessons actually got to go ahead or had the time that I had dedicated to doing it was shortened or whatever. And so I think there's more, it's that feeling that I had of disappointment that what I had put a lot of work into was not necessarily going to eventuate. That's a bit crushing.
Yes. Yes, I completely understand that. That thinking that what you don't get to do, and will the time come again for those things too? Sometimes
Yeah, that's right.
What's the size of your school? It's Nairn Primary School. What's the size of it, Giselle?
We are 17 classes, so we'll say I think that's just on 500 students.
Yep.
And at the upper primary level, which is obviously where I teach, we have 4, 6, 7 classes this year.
Yep. And it's beautiful spot up there in the Adelaide Hills. Lovely.
Yes.
Yes. Lovely view from our building in particular. Look out over the paddocks and Mount Barker Summit, so it's fantastic.
Yeah. Windy, but fantastic.
Cold in winter.
It's cold in summer.
Cold in summer.
This morning. I wasn't ready this morning.
Okay, so apart from the chatty rambles.
Yes, we'll get on to our topic today, which is picture books for older readers. And Giselle, what's the struggle with...
Or maybe the question that you're asking, is it about is there a struggle with older readers and the kinds of books that we can find that can engage them. You know, sometimes our immediate thought isn't always picture books.
That's it.
Yeah. And it very much is about engagement. I mean, that drives a lot of what I'm thinking about in my teaching. Anyway, that's where the whole bit of a disaster of today came from, because I was really considering about engagement and what there's some content we really needed to get heads around leading into this sort of next part of the term. And so it could have been a very dry lesson. I'd really given it some time to making how I was looking at the engagement to get them involved. And so that very much underpins a lot of what I'm thinking about when planning. And so we've talked before about that with reading and motivating older readers.
Yes.
And engagement and that kind of thing. And so even when I am looking to bring picture books in, well, actually it's probably not that way. When I'm looking at a content or a concept that I need to do with students, I think of picture books as a form of that engagement to do it. So a lot of the time it's very much for me thinking, who tells it better than I will?
Yes.
Which author or which voice is going to bring that across in a more authentic way, or just with their word choice is really going to hit that better than I could in front of the class. And so I'll just be the conduit by bringing in the book that does it. So I think that's where the picture books for it's not necessarily that the books are written for an older reader, but how I choose to use a picture book or particular books with them to make that.
And I think that's just such a great point about, you know, what is it that someone, you know, the voice and how someone else can say that within that tight piece of text, because, you know, the picture book is just going to bring that in. You know, it's not reading, you know, the whole novel, you know, of on that concept or topic, or it's not just listening to an interview or whatever, but, you know, that there is this very intentional, like someone's already been quite intentional, the writer, in bringing that concept or that idea to the world. So, yes. I couldn't agree more on the power that picture books really have for any age group. We have asked you, because you're a Year 6-7 teacher, to think. So we're, whilst you said for older readers, Phil, we're also really thinking sort of upper primary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So are there students that still think that these are for younger children?
Yeah, so it's funny because that's actually where I was going to go, that in my upper primary classroom, not necessarily this year, but over time, there can be some real differences in how students approach picture books. Some think very strongly that it is meant to be an early reading experience, so it's the type of book that helps you learn to read and you don't read it once you can read. Yeah. And then I have students who perhaps have a low level of reading skill and feel a lot of comfort in a picture book, but a level of embarrassment of reading that in front of their peers perhaps. And so there's a real struggle there for some of those students that I love these books, they suit me, but I can't see anyone else reading a book like this. Am I allowed to still be reading picture books? So it's very much something that I bring in right from the start of the year. I actually have a book that I often start the year with, and that's The Koala Who Could, Rachel Bright and Jim Field. I love the series, all of them. I think the message behind them, the humour, the fact that they're written in rhyme, just all of it. But The Koala Who Could sort of became a bit of a catchphrase because it finishes with life can be great when you try something new. And so I often start the year with that book for that exact line of you're in a new class, it's a new year, what are you going to try and what are you going to aim for? And it's also about deliberately setting up that picture books are great and everyone can read them and we're going to be reading them quite a lot. And so I try to set that message very early, not necessarily knowing the students in front of me yet, that some of them are going to be dismissive and they need to kind of work through that to, hey, actually, we're going to gain something from these books. Some of them are going to need picture books and need to feel that validation that there's a space for that type of reading in this class. So, and that probably follows to another one that I love. It's only reasonably new, the All the Ways to Be Smart, Davina Bell and Alison Colpoys. Wonderful, wonderful book for any age person, adults included, that our ways to be smart look different for everybody. And that's another start, though only the last 2 years, another new start of yearbook that to set up the way our classroom looks and the tone that our classroom has about what it means to be a learner. And if I can do that through picture books that show it in a somewhat light manner, but says the message, it's not just your teacher saying it. Look, people even write books about this message. That's how important it is.
What a wonderful way to illustrate a point.
Yes, and connect life to, and somebody else is thinking about this too, that it's not our own. I think that's what books certainly allow us to know, that others are, we're not alone in these things.
So going back a step, we're talking about using picture books for all different purposes. You thought it'd be great to frame it within some of the timeless teas. So if we talk about...
Because I love the teas. I love them. Every time I'm at one of Sharon's workshops, I'm like, yes, I know these teas. Like they really are underpinning what literacy learning looks like. And I just... completely agree. So, yes, I was absolutely thinking, even when talking about the idea of picture books in general, the first thing that comes to my mind is tantalising texts, because there's so much to grasp in picture books, and I just love them. So even if I wasn't using them for necessarily a purpose, just the sheer joy of another story is enough.
Yes. And actually, I'm just going to jump in on that word joy, working with, the school that I was working with today, or workshop with them. That was, the piece that really came up again is, this joy. Our literacy learning, our experiences and what we experience and what we create, we want it to be full of joy.
Yeah.
That's the engagement. It doesn't mean that some things we're doing aren't hard, or challenging, but then joy comes from that too, that we're working, we're learning about things, we're discovering things, but joy should be a part of it all. So
and that makes our teaching enjoyable, which it should be. And it's wonderful.
Just as much the joy of teaching.
Yeah. And that's about our well-being as well, isn't it? That's another whole area.
One of the ones, thinking about joy, that a couple of years back I had a class that for different reasons it possibly wasn't a joyful kind of tone. Like, we really had to work on that and build that amongst the class. And that, there's some students who were, but there were some other students who were going through things that meant joy was hard for them to find quickly. One of the books that I read that year was, I laugh about it now, but it was Sam and Dave Dig a Hole, Mac Barnett and John Klassen. Just love John Klassen, the master of the side-eye characters through I Want a Hat and That's Not My Hat and those kind of books. But in Sam and Dave Dig a Hole, it really sets up that sort of audience versus the characters in the story, because the characters go to literally dig a hole. And when I read the title to, upper primary kids, you could see the eye rolling of, seriously? She's going to read us a book about a hole? And I'm like, no, bear with me. You'll get this. And made sure I was really clear about showing the images, because if you've read the book, that's something really key about the opening image and the final image. But through it all, the characters are digging a hole because they want to find something spectacular. And what they find they don't actually find it. It comes through in the images. So as a reader or observer of the book, when I was reading it aloud, the students could see it, but of course the characters are blindly digging, and they don't, because it's not in the text, it's in the imagery. And these students were just captivated because they had that frustration of going, oh, seriously, dig the hole down, you'll see it, because John Klassen's drawn the spectacular thing at the bottom. But it gets all the way to the end, and then there's a twist, and it's quite an unfinished book. And so I read that, held it up. The students are like, what? What was that about? Hey, what about? And I'm going, no one ever knows. I said, there's whole streams online of people who have supposed endings to this book, and the author and the illustrator are not telling us. There's just no answer. And these kids are like, what? How is that possible?
Yeah.
And I'm going, that's what picture books do. And whatever their experience in the past had been, or what they viewed the role of a picture book in their life before, that one book really shifted it, really shifted it. And I had upper primary students who were bugging the library staff to borrow that book multiple times. It's a, standard.
Sorry.
I was going to say it's a standard picture book, very little text really, and it's about literally two characters digging a hole. But my goodness, because you could just read into it and that imagination of what could be going on, and it brought joy, and it shifted how we sort of started to approach reading in general and the power of books and the power of words after starting with that very quite simple but not simple text.
Yes, yeah.
Fantastic.
So, Giselle, we'll get you to talk about, you've sort of grouped the texts or the picture books into some using the timeless T's as categories. And we'll just let listeners know that all of the texts that you mention will be in the show notes, so they'll be able to retrieve that list again, because we're aware that there may be people driving as they listen to this and they'll be wanting to pull over to write down that book and then that book and then that book.
Yep.
So if that is likely, if you are driving, just know you can check this out in the show notes. Otherwise, pull over. Because it's yes.
I've been there. I know about this when I listen to the podcast and people start mentioning books. I know this experience.
Yes. Or maybe listen to the podcast later when you can make all the notes about it. Because I love how when you're talking about these, you're really giving. I think as you talk about the books, it really prompts how we might want to use that book. We'll see the potential in it, and there'll be many of these that we'll connect with and we'll go, that's a definite for me, to chase up.
Oh, I hope so.
Yes.
That's a value that I have from listening to the podcast and things, of going, that fits with where I need these students to go, or that fits with something we're covering right now. And
yes.
I hope that it'll be helpful for someone else.
Giselle, there is no question it'll be helpful.
And while you're mentioning the show notes, Sharon, I just people have probably realised when they get the weekly newsletter from Q Learning, the exact list of those books or resources are in the newsletter as well as in the show notes, so they match identical.
I know you do wonderful work on that, Phil. That's quite a time. What's the word I'm after? It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
You do wonderfully well on that. So,
but
all
it
right.
is excellent, because I get those emails and go, they're all there. Excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Let's go. Where do you want to start? You want to start with the...
look, we were talking about tantalising text.
yes.
So I can go with some of those that I read really mainly for the joy of that book, that I'm not necessarily using it as a mentor text to take into something else, other than just to say, I love this book, it's really great, let's read it. About that joy and about that engagement, and about showing those students for a moment in time that if you are feeling like you're reading some potentially a fairly deep or intricate novel at the moment, or if you're working your way through an information text because you're in a research mode with what you're doing with your study, that a picture book can still give you a moment in time of joy or an emotional connection, or even prompt a thought that is just in a much quicker way than you might have had with your other reading. And so, tantalising text is exactly how I would refer to some of the picture books, because all I want from them is for my students to experience it and just go, wow, how good was that book?
Yeah.
In time. So I think, Sharon, we've talked before, one of my all-time favourites, first discovered at uni studying teaching, was The Mysteries of Harris Burdick.
Yes.
I love that book.
Top of the
Van
list.
Allsburg.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so good. And I think it could lend itself to so many things in classroom, and some years we don't do anything with it other than just to read it and to have that class discussion, that rich talk immediately after, going, well, what do you think it is? And so I guess for people who don't know, it's the idea that Harris Burdick was a author or illustrator and had left these 14 potential stories with a publisher and then never came back. And so Chris Van Allsburg has this script at the start. Chris Van Allsburg's collected them into a book, and here they are for you now. And so I think Sharon, do you have a favourite? Is there one that sticks with you every time you look at this book?
The fifth chair ended up in France.
That's my favourite too. I don't know if we've talked about that before, but that's my favourite too. So
yes, with the nun flying through the abbey on a chair.
Yes, on the floating chair.
Yes.
And I love that one, because if it's the fifth and it says something like the 7 chairs or something, there's more chairs.
Yes.
Where did they go?
Yes.
What were they doing?
And who's sitting on them?
It's an incredible book of wondering.
Yes.
A tiny voice asked,
is he the one?
Is he the one?
Yes.
And the little light coming through the window.
Yes.
Oh,
my
Yes.
goodness. Yep.
Yeah, Archie Smith,
one of,
Boy Wonder.
Yep.
Oh, yes. One of my other favourites, Mr. Linden's Library.
Yes.
He had warned her about the book. Now it was too late.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
there's the image. She's asleep with the open book, and there's that plant just creeping out of the book, and you're going, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know. It is. I just think it's the most wondrous book. It's just incredible.
And I think wondrous is the exact word for it,
Yes.
because it is full. You cannot be anything but full of wonder in that book. It's so intriguing.
And so inspiring. I don't think I've ever introduced it to a class and not had at least one person want to go away and write or think about it and propose ideas of what could have happened or what the story belonging to that image and that caption could be.
Yes.
And I just think, again, something that on paper seems so simple is just so powerful in the impact it can have. And so there'll be times where I just read it for the pure joy of going, look at this book, and other times that we will use it as a prompt for thinking about how we craft a narrative or how we develop intrigue in a story or something.
Yes, or how we just actually grow our imaginations even more than we could have ever known, to have those thoughts and ideas that without that is its tantalisingness, isn't it?
Yes.
That it really can, just tantalise the imagination.
And even if we do have tasks with these picture books, we all would definitely, with any picture book or any book really, enjoy it first, just to explore it and enjoy it as the author wants you to enjoy it. And then then after that, another reading or whatever, we'll start to use it in a task way. Yep.
Yes, that's very true, and a really good point. That it really is about letting the book stand on its own and really saying, look at this as a piece of art, as a piece of literature, as anything, that it really does stand alone. And I feel so passionate about it. I think we're gonna think about this book, and we might bring some things out. And often I'll have had an idea of how I might want to follow a book, but with a picture book in particular, I'm very open for the students to take it in another direction, because if they do that, it shows me that they engaged, that they were in that book, and they're thinking about what they want to do with it. And so it's very rare that I will have brought in a picture book with a very structured lesson to follow straight behind it, because I don't think what I see with students, I don't think that would be authentic for them working on it and really getting to love that book the way I wanted them to. So
it's about
I'll have ideas, but I'll very much have some flexibility in what I want to see them bring from it to show me that, yes, they understood why of all the books, why did I show you this one today?
Yes.
Now, you've got some other tantalising ones here.
Oh, do you know After the Fall? Dance and
No.
I don't quite know. Oh, it's the Humpty Dumpty story.
Oh, yes.
About the
yes.
egg. And then when I read that to older students, they're like, are you seriously reading us the Humpty Dumpty story now? Like, hang on a minute. What's up with this? And because he goes through the self-doubt and there's a lot of growth mindset sort of stuff in there that's really great to talk about. But again, I don't actually read it for that purpose. I read it for that twist at the end that comes when you open the page that reveals what's going on in the Humpty Dumpty story, and the students go, oh, wow. Like, the illustrations are amazing. I don't think they've ever thought about the idea that Humpty Dumpty is an egg and eggs can be things. Love it. Just love it. And the fact that it has some growth mindset sort of story behind it and is just a bonus.
Yes.
Love it. Tantalising story. But others, I think we talked in the podcast on vocabulary where The Word Collector by Peter Reynolds, that was such an inspiring book for me because I do love words, to then show that to students as we're going to be this person. We're going to be like Jerome and we're going to collect words. And so I pretty much love anything Peter Reynolds does and I'm going to bring one of his books in at some point throughout a year. And I think he just really captures... like Sky Colour, that's a really beautiful one about that idea that colour is open and the way you express yourself in art should be open to your personal expression. And I think there's some really good things that can follow that for students. So,
and you make a good point there too that, anything by Peter Reynolds would say the same thing about Chris Van Allsburg.
yes.
That these, as lots of authors, we would say that authors and illustrators, because in this instance we're talking about authors who are illustrators as well, which is extraordinary.
Yes.
So,
well, I was going to say one of the others that is like that, Maths Curse and Science Verse, the two separate ones.
yes,
Lane Smith, just love the illustrations that Lane Smith does on anything.
yes,
But paired that with John Sieska, I think we say.
yes,
Maths Curse was the one I found first, and you can really, you could read that with a lot of different age levels, but for upper primary students, they actually get the references of the mathematical problems and this character that their teacher basically curses them by saying, you can think of anything as a maths problem, and the whole day then flows of this student going through this classroom day and everything that comes into it has maths involved, and the kid thinks they're going crazy. Students get it because they can see all of the situations that the character goes through. They know about binary numbers or fractional quantities, or it happens all the time, and it becomes so funny to see that with the eyes of a student who actually gets what's going on, rather than just enjoys an entertaining story. But they actually go, oh, yeah, that would be funny if you had to count like this, or you had to divide cupcakes, and then the way it's all neatly resolved at the end. You get a few giggles and you think, oh, good, like you actually got the story. And that really is a story that works for older students, and it is such a magic pairing of an author and an illustrator that bring both elements to make that entertaining.
yeah, yeah. No, we are just, there's such a rich, so many rich partnerships and so many, between authors and illustrators, and then so many of these incredible author-illustrator, singular ones as well. And it is, and of course, it's such a nice way for students to enter into and explore that world of picture books through authors, and especially, these are sophisticated illustrators. This is real art here, and so our older readers, a lot of the artwork really is appealing to their, just to how much they can gain from the nuances of characters or of information, all the quirks and interesting things that only older students are going to be able to really pick up as well.
Yes.
So, yeah. Bit like Anthony Brown. There's another one that,
Yeah.
All right. So, do you want to lead?
I think we were talking about tantalising text in the sense of just bringing a book that has joy or a moment in time to do. But I also do use picture books that lead into tasks that are authentic to what the students need to be thinking about or working on from a developmental, curriculum-wise or whatever sort of sense. And so a picture book can be a really nice way to do that too. Really rich language experience, but it's not just me teaching it. We introduce it with a book.
Yes.
And I think that's really lovely. I know you had spoken with Alison before about Mechanica and the work that her students did following the reading of that book. And you think about examples like that the picture book's really driving what that is. And the work it's flowing out of students afterwards, and that's fantastic when that kind of happens. We had that I haven't done this one for a while, but Little Mouse's Book of Fears by Emily Graver, who's just phenomenal illustrator anyway. We were talking about language, and it was part of sort of the spelling work and looking at prefixes and suffixes, Greek and Latin roots, all of those kind of things. And so Little Mouse's Book of Fears is a list of phobias. The illustrations are really telling the story more so than the text, which is quite minimal, but the illustrations are funny as they build your understanding of what each phobia is. And this mouse that's going through the book, reading each phobia and then just freaking out even further about them all. And that led on to this whole exploration of the students into what are other interesting phobias, and the one about the fear of 13 and the fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth and all the, there's just this phenomenal list of phobias.
There's hundreds, isn't there?
There is, and so many that I didn't know. And there was also brought in that, skepticism of, is that really a thing? Really? Someone's got a phobia about that and now there's a word for it? But it became such a rich thing for students to do. If I had said, okay, we're going to look up strange phobias, they might have got on board because some of them are funny and interesting. But by doing it with a book, it had introduced it to them in a way that was more entertaining than me just talking in front of the class, because there was a character and the pictures are telling, an amusing story as it goes along. And that led them to go, oh, I didn't know about that one. I want to know about more. Yeah. Excellent. Good, let's go.
and there it just brings it back to the core of what, in writers write, they are opening doors for us to learn more about the world and ourselves and others. Yes. That opening that door, and that's what we just have to do by bringing the book. It opens the door. Yes. So, even if we're bringing it thinking, we could, in our minds, we could move into phobias in this instance. But 9 times out of 10, we don't have to say a thing, do we? We just let the book do the work and they're away with it. Yes. So,
and that's so true. And I think that opening the door, I knew I needed to really give a good coverage of poetry. I hadn't done it, hadn't really covered it very well, and I needed to really get that into the kids. I felt like it had been lacking, really, that we hadn't had a lot of poetry exposure. So I started with The Highway Rat by Julia Donaldson, and again, a whole bunch were like, Julia Donaldson? I read her when I was in junior primary. What are you doing? That's our buddy book. And I'm like, no, this one's really funny. And so I'd read it, or we'd watch the animation, which is brilliant, great voice actors in that. And then I said, did you realise that it follows the pattern from a very famous poem called The Highwayman, Alfred Noyes? And they were like, what? And so then I bought the picture book version that has the phenomenal illustrations by Charles Keeping, and read that one to them. And, of course, it's much darker and it's much more a very different story, really, to The Highway Rat. But because of that rhythm that comes through and just the skill of poetry of both authors in this case, the students were hooked. And we had students who kept coming back to The Highwayman going, this is an amazing story. And I went, I know, and that's called a ballad. Let's follow this. And there we go. Now we're into poetry. But just, it was an amazing moment to hook them in with perhaps some of that dismissal of we're watching junior primary things again, and me going, no, you'll see. And I mean, I would never dismiss Julie Donaldson. I think she's amazing. We're in awe of someone who can rhyme like that. I just tell an amazing story.
Yes, without it feeling contrived.
Oh,
it's
just amazing.
It's masterful.
I love reading them aloud. I have 2 young kids, and it's just a favourite to read any of hers aloud. With Axel Scheffler's hilarious illustrations to follow.
Yes.
They're just beautiful to read aloud, and they have such a rhythm to them that's amazing. And so to be able to do that to students and remind them that that's a joy of reading poetry is how it sounds, and any poetry told, with a book to give you some visual prompts as well. And then the link to the Highwayman, and it was fantastic. So then we had a whole bunch of students that wanted to search up other kind of Gothic era of ballad poetry and all the dark ones, and it was just, Lady of Shalott comes out, and I'm like, oh, that's it. My little Anne with an E heart is, fabulous.
No, I'm glad you've made that, just brought the poetry aspect to us again on that one, because we've had a bit of a push on poetry because poetry just brings us, so much again. And I love the way that you've offered the really an entree into the Highwayman through the Highway Rat.
Yes.
Because that whole notion of what sits upon our ear as we hear poetry, and what we can then do with that, that we can take when we've had such rich experiences with it, we go, I know that rhythm, I recognise it, I recognise how that works, that then we own that, then we can use that, as, and whether that's the task that was planned for that or not, it won't matter. The fact that, we learn from the company we keep, that what sits on our ear we then take with us into other other things that we write or we think about or know that we can express in particular ways.
Yeah, and I think that's really true for our upper primary and into lower secondary students who are really starting those real independent thoughts about how do I see the world, what do I take into the world with the knowledge that I have and the experiences I have, and the influences that are on me. What are the ways that I view things? And I think you can have some amazing conversations with a novel that teases out a character's decision making and a character's perspectives, but sometimes that's going to take too long to get to a point on something, or some students may still struggle to access the points that are coming through that text. So a picture book just has such a place for shifting thinking, I think, and to making an impact for a student. And so, there's quite a lot of picture books that I use quite intentionally for just shifting a bit of thought, I think, for some of my students, or that I know fits where they are at in their life, in their thinking. There'll be picture books that I'm hoping will hit the mark for them, or will get them going, oh, I haven't thought about that before. Yeah. And the book's over. I've got thinking to do here. I'm just left. I need to wrestle with this. I need to. Is there another book? Is there more? That's really powerful. And I think because picture books can be a quick read, they're not an easy read necessarily for some of our students. And I think, I think there's so much power in that. I think it's fantastic.
Love the messages there, Giselle, because it's it is that power that we don't, that we can leave to the author, but we can also be, and you talked about this, in motivating readers too, we can be quite intentional in thinking I've noticed my children could do with, or my students could benefit from this book and its exploration of X.
Yes.
You know, that we can, without it being, you know, okay, now we'll have a lesson on blah or on X, but what the book allows students to do the thinking through that in, I think, a much more sophisticated and personal way.
Yes.
Because it can be personal because it's also one step removed from them through a book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, do you know the picture book Room on Our Rock?
Yes.
Temple and Kate Temple.
Oh,
my
that's an extraordinary book.
It's just extraordinary.
Talk some more about that one because,
to read it aloud, I think, is also where it makes an impact. And so on the surface, it's the story of some seals who appear to be lost or at danger at sea, and they're looking for a safe place to land. And as you read the story the first way through, if you do it out loud, you should, as a teacher, pre-read it, because then you'll get what you need to do for an out loud read. But you read it the first time through in a very almost aggressive, negative, confrontational kind of manner, that there's no room on our rock and you're not welcome and you cannot come. And it's very much there's no space for you here. The rock is absolutely full of space, but the ones who are on it are not letting anyone on. And then you get to the end of the book and it asks you to see that there's two sides to a story. So now read this story backwards. And you read it backwards, and the cleverness of the authors have placed the phrasing of the words that when you read it in reverse, it's so much more positive and it's welcoming and there's an acceptance. You are different. Of course you are welcome. I can see you're in trouble. Please come onto our rock.
Oh, how clever.
And so you read it with that negative tone. You get to that last point. You pause so the students can sink in what you're talking about. There's two sides to a story. And then you read it again with a real positive tone and you just watch the student faces go, oh my goodness. And then you end the whole book with, so what's that an analogy for? And the student's going, that's humans. That's human life. And we're like, thank you. Yes, it is.
Yep.
And it's amazing. And it's a picture book. It's very simple. On the surface, it looks like a book that's got lovely seals. It's, beautiful illustrations. Great for our junior students. Yes, it is, because it's a great story for everybody. It's such a message. And for my older students who can see it coming from the minute you start that reverse read, and they can see what you're doing with your voice, they just pick it up so quickly most of them do, of what's going on and how clever that is to have the phrasing that could be read in either direction to change the tone of what the message is. It's a phenomenal story. And for students to actually see that and then question that and see that analogy of what that means in a real world sense, just brilliant. Just a brilliant book for that.
It is extraordinary. And there's actually, I've had come across a number of students who've read it who actually haven't, just by picking it up themselves, haven't fully understood what's going on there. Because I think what you've just said, and, the importance of reading aloud picture books for older readers is really their key into what picture books, the sophistication that picture books for older readers requires. There is much more. It's a slow read. It's not, you're not racing through this to, and I'm done with the book.
Yes.
These are thoughtful books. These are books that they take us into, if we marry it with the thinking that the slow read sort of affords us, that we're going to get completely extraordinary things from these books. So, and that's, I think, a really great example of one of those books that, like you say, on the surface looks like it may be, a junior primary kind of book, but it's in the reading. Like, how do we read these books? And I think that's the wondrous thing about picture books, is that they're there to be read carefully, and reading that whole page and really exploring everything that the page offers, rather than read my 32 pages, what next?
Yes, that's right. And that's where I think that it links so much, or how I see so much of using picture books as those timeless teas with the thinkers talking, because you're right that a student possibly reading it on their own, if they get that they're supposed to read it backwards, without some of the rhythm or the tone, may not realise what actually has shifted in that story. And when you do that story and you've done it out loud, and then the students are just full of conversation about, I think it's this, and don't you think it was amazing when this was happening? And that's that powerful talking about what they've been reading, or in this case, listening to, and what they think about that, and what does that make them wonder. I had that years ago now with The Rabbits of John Marsden and Sean Tan. I just adore anything Sean Tan will draw. I would, watch him draw on a scrap of paper. Like, it's just phenomenal. And reading that to students, or having students look through that the story itself looks like the feral invasion of rabbits onto Australia's landscape and what that means environmentally. But when those rabbits are in military uniforms and you see that playing out across Sean Tan's images, and for students to actually have that conversation going, I think there's another story in there. Is that about, like, invasion of Australia? And you go, do you think it's about invasion of Australia? And watch them unpacking what happened in those images and what the words are saying alongside that. That I couldn't teach that from just literally teaching it with the same impact that someone with that incredible artistry and John Marsden's great use of words, those two people together tell that in a way that's it makes so much better impact than me just introducing it as a concept. And older students can appreciate how clever that is, the art that's within the illustrations, and the double layer of story that's going on in that one. And then they want to talk about it, and they want to know more about how you represent things like that, and how do you write like this, and how do you tell such a big piece of history in your 32 pages.
Yeah, that. I totally agree with the insights that that pairing too, John Marsden and Sean Tan. They've done a few successful, Gary Crew and Sean Tan.
Yes.
But it's it's the insights from both the author and the illustrator there, where it's that, like we sort of talk about that slow read, but then the slow thinking that we can do about that, and the thinking we can do for ourselves.
Yes.
It's really...
I think, it's amazing to watch that happen for students. I think when I'll speak very much about sort of the students that I've had in the last few years, in that there's a lot of viewing of things. There's a lot of things being presented to me. Mm-hmm. But when you have a picture book, it's not always necessarily obvious. Sometimes it is obvious, but it's not always obvious. You are reading the pictures, and you are reading the story, or you are hearing the story by someone who has spent some time to kind of craft the presentation they're going to give of this story. And that involves thinking, and that involves students actually engaging in to say, going on here, rather than just necessarily a surface level of it. And I think picking a picture book that can help students to do that thinking, all the way back at the start, it may be just sheer enjoyment of the book. It may not actually have, you picked it deliberately for a curriculum link or something.
Yes.
But for students to have that time to get into deep thinking and to reflect on what's happening and what was the storyteller, the author, trying to convey to me, what do I already know about this? What do I need to know to get this story on another level? What other information do I need, or who is this story true for? How did I not know about this? Those kind of questions that can come through from having a picture book, bring it to students in a very quick but not read quick.
Yes.
in a snapshot of time.
Yes, and how you talk about, that there can be that they can shift their perspectives and understanding from that.
Yes.
They get to make the shift, not just be told about it. That a shift can be made through their own thinking process.
Yeah.
There's a connection with poetry here where picture books are similar, that they focus your thinking in a quicker way on a particular thing.
Yes.
And also both are much better read aloud. Poetry
yes.
and picture books. So
and
there's connection there.
There really is. There's some very deliberate choices by authors about the words you put in a picture book, because if you have too much text on the page, no one's going to notice the illustrations, and it's maybe no longer a picture book. So there's some very intentional decisions by authors to get the exact words that are going to build that impact or make a scene on that page, which is exactly what a poet does, to pick the words that often very succinctly hit us the hardest. And so, I absolutely agree that there's some real decisions about the craft of these texts that it's so worth exploring with students about that, because you could be quite effusive and using lots and lots of wonderful vocabulary and wonderful words, but that's a longer text. That's a whole other story. So, it's really, really powerful to get students look at the words chosen to make that sentence on that page, or as you said, in that poem.
Yes, and how they're even placed on the page, and the use of all those literary devices. They're much more intentional again.
Yes.
Now, Giselle, just with your thinkers talking, talk to us. You've just a few more. So you've talked about Room on Our Rock and the Rabbits. Some of your others that I know that you've got here, some of them are more unfamiliar, to me. So,
sure.
Yes, I'd be interested in a few more of those.
Well, two that I'm raving about to anyone who will listen at the moment.
We're listening.
I haven't actually introduced to my students this year. One of them only came out last month, but are the two books by Matt Della Pena and illustrated by Christian Robinson, The Last Stop on Market Street and Milo Imagines the World. That's the newer one. They are a very different world to what many of my students would be living. And so The Last Stop on Market Street, a young boy in a very urban city, we would think, urban environment, needs to catch the bus home with Grandma. And we get the impression that he possibly lives with Grandma. And he questions along the way, why do we catch the bus? Why don't we have a car? Why do we always travel this way? Why don't we do? And so it's very much about him observing from the bus and on the bus, who are these people? What do they do? Bringing in those sights and sounds and experiences of what it means to travel on a bus through a city space. And we get to the end of the book, and it's a hard neighbourhood that they get off on, and part of your thinking, if you've been led down a particular path as a reader, is to think that perhaps they live in this neighbourhood, and you have a few judgments and things that can come in there, and it's worth unpacking that with students, because when the final pages are revealed of why they're in the neighbourhood and why they took the bus there that day, I don't know, I'm probably an emotional reader, but my heart goes, oh, that's amazing. And then you see, like, Grandma's messages the whole way through the story of what they were doing, why they were on the bus, and what he can take from that bus experience is it's just moving. And for students to go, oh, oh, I kind of judged this way. Actually, this is what they were doing. And the second book, Milo Imagines the World, perhaps even more powerful for that Milo is on public transport, and he is with his sister, who's on her phone, so she's not really paying attention to him. And he notices the people that get on the subway, and at a couple of every 2 or 3 pages, Milo draws in his book, so you get to see the sketch. And he has imagined that the boy sitting opposite him, who's got very fine hair and is dressed in a suit, lives in a mansion, and he has a butler, and here are the people who come and serve him all day long. So he makes these, they're not harsh judgments, but he makes judgments of the people he sees on the bus and then has a little imagining of what they would be doing. You get to the end of the story when Milo gets off the subway with his sister, and so does the boy in the suit, and he starts to unravel, oh, actually you can't judge someone by their face. You don't know what they're going through. And when the final page opens and you see where Milo has travelled with his sister, and the other boy actually happens to be needing to go to that same space. And again, that reveal is just, oh, wow, okay. And for many of my students, I don't know if they've ever had that experience, but it's such an eye-opening story, and it's all told with delicate language and incredible illustrations by Christian Robinson. There's actually an online reading of Christian Robinson reading Last Stop on Market Street, and hearing his accent and that a very urban accent come through to read it, it's just amazing. And again, probably even more powerful than me reading the book to the students. But it's those kind of stories that we want to be bringing to our kids, that take them into another place and another person's shoes and going, this is what life is like for some people. This is the experiences they have. And for our students, potentially, who've, maybe passed a bit of a judgment at the start of those short page book, going and having that flip at the end, that shift of their thinking, going, oh, that's what was happening, and really starting to question for themselves. That's amazing storytelling, and I am very glad to be able to bring books like that to our students. So.
Especially good for older readers, isn't it?
Yes,
older
very
students,
much.
to get them
very
into
much.
other people's worlds.
Yep. Yeah, very much.
All that empathy building.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that empathy is a really key word there. Wes Landier, Paul Flashman and Kevin Hawkes, a little bit of an older book now, but Wes Landier is absolutely about empathy, because Wes is the outcast at school. He doesn't fit in. He doesn't have the cool haircut. He doesn't like playing soccer. He doesn't fit with everybody, and he's the offside on the image. Mum and Dad are talking about, what are we going to do with him? How do we help? And then set in a kind of American suburb, sort of. So he has a summer project, and he decides he's going to start his own civilization. And so he gets a seed, and the seed grows into this tree, and he uses the plant to make clothing, to make food, to make a counting system, to make insect repellent. And one by one, the neighbourhood tormentors realise that he's onto something, because his life is so much easier, and he's not trying to fit a mould. He's worked out, this is what I can do, and I'm okay with that. And so it's a fairly simple read of it, I suppose, but the conversations that thinker talking that can come from it at the end, going, have you ever felt like that? And what does it mean to fit in? And when should we go our own way? And how do we show that we can make an impact with what we have to offer? Is just from one simple book. It can open just an absolute treasure trove of conversation and thinking.
Because reading is thinking, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
it's all about thinking.
But the talking, of course, is just so
opens up that thinking.
Yeah, because then, it's just, especially as you're talking about Wes Landier, I remember reading that and thinking, all right, that there's definitely, it's all about empathy, but at that point I remember thinking also, it's also for some people, it's then about feeling understood.
Yes.
So,
yes.
We're all looking to understand more about ourselves, our world and others. And so we don't always know what that's going to bring to us, but I think you're absolutely right that our perspectives, books change our perspectives and understandings, and that conversation, thinkers really thinking deeply and having that opportunity to explore those thoughts with peers, with and through and almost with an author and an illustrator. That's you really having that sort of conversation with them as well.
Yes. And there's a lot of picture books, particularly ones that are bringing up thoughtful topics as part of their text. A lot of them will have author notes and illustrator notes at the back of why they wrote it or what they were hoping to do with the story, and that's amazing for students to get into that. Once they've sat with a book for a little while, we've had even a moment of quiet at the end of a book and gone, we're just going to rest with that for a minute. We're not actually going to talk about it. Just think that in, and then give them that chance or read out to them of the author notes of what they were doing. And that just adds a whole other layer for students to see. I know it sounds funny, but this a real person wrote this book. This is what the real person was thinking about. What did we think when we read it, and how did we get into it? The Proudest Blue, that's a fairly new one in the last year, Ibtihaj Muhammad and S.K. Ali, about a girl wearing the hijab for the first time to school on reaching a certain age into 6th grade, actually, and she decides that she's going to wear her hijab in the proudest blue, and it's the blue of the oceans. And she's okay with that, and she knows that there's going to be some difference. But the story is told from the younger sister who's really struggling with, loves it, is so proud that her sister is wearing this, but is really struggling with, but people tease her, and people, is she ashamed? Is she embarrassed? Why am I whispering about my sister wearing this now? And she goes back to her sister in the schoolyard to say sort of, are you okay? And there are some characters who are calling names or teasing about the fact that she's wearing this now. And the little sister's really struggling with it, but the older girl is, no, I'm proud. I'm okay. I'm fine. I have friends and I have this, and this is important to me. And I think we haven't seen a story like that much. It's often the main character who makes a change and is then questioning about their change. But in this case, the character is proud about it the whole way through. It's the younger sister who needs reassurance and understanding. And so there's all layers about that in there, as well as, the understanding of other religions. And then the author notes and the illustrator notes at the end just take it to another level. And that's a phenomenal book that would be lovely for lots of ages to read, because the language in it is beautiful about the blue of the oceans and the waves, and it's the fact that it's called the proud blue the whole way through. But for older students who really can understand the context of what's going on in this story and for these characters, that's an amazing story, and told in again, I say it's a simple way, but it's that short version of a picture book, but such a powerful story to then consider and to talk about how we show that understanding of other humans and society. So, yeah, books like that.
Yeah. And do you know, Giselle, I've just made this connection to discussions that we were having at the school today, where when you were talking about the author notes, saying why they wrote, what they were trying to do with this story, that sometimes I think that's the question we forget to ask our children or our students when they're writing about what were you trying to do in this story? Because sometimes that our students have got these incredible, it's not just about writing, I've got to write it in this structure, but it's actually, I've got a story about this that I'm trying to communicate. And so I think when we ask them the question, what were you trying to do in this story, not in an accusatory kind of way, but as writer, what was the message? What is this story about? What are you wanting to convey here?
Yes.
I think I think we sometimes just lose that aspect to the right.
I agree, because I also think with an upper primary student, we get caught up in the focus that, particularly with narrative, you need to really craft a story, and you're going to need a lot of words for that. So you're going to need to build this out into a, and perhaps there's a little bit of that standardised testing floating around in there, where I think about the things that might need to come through in a story. Yeah. A picture book is a story, and you might actually be writing a short story for that reason. And I think I would quite honestly say I forget that, and I get caught up in that. Oh, we're trying to develop some stamina. We're trying to develop some longer writing skills. Yes, we are. But maybe sometimes I need to remind my students that they can write a short story that could lend itself to a picture book story, because the words you've chosen and the story that's in your heart that you need to tell is actually maybe better told as a picture book length story.
Yes. Yeah.
And sometimes as a poem.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. As well, a poem within a picture book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, fantastic seems so inadequate.
I could talk about this for hours. I say that about everything with literacy, don't I? But oh my goodness, I was laughing about that with someone today, because looking at Finding Our Heart, Thomas Mayer and Black Douglas, we've been considering about Reconciliation Week. And I think that message of the Uluru Statement can be told as the whole to our upper primary students, but this picture book just snaps right into what it is. It's the heart of this message. And it was such a good... many of my students hadn't actually seen it. And so although we had talked about the Uluru Statement from the heart and the lead up to that particular treaty, for the students to see it replicated in a picture book and go, oh, that's a really good way to tell it. Like it's exactly it. And I'm going, yes, everyone needs to read this book to start that conversation of what comes next. And we were just having a chat and could keep going really talking about this one book. That prompts 1,000 conversations. So.
Yes, yeah. Thinkers truly talking and truly thinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome to Country. Did we?
Oh my goodness! Welcome to Country.
Yes.
Oh, the first time I saw that book was in a bookshop in Adelaide that, Sharon, you found me on the floor sitting down reading before. The first time I saw it, I just went, where has this book been?
Yes.
Why? Everyone, every classroom, every school needs this book as a beginning point to thinking about welcome to country, but acknowledgement of country. How do we express that gratitude to, the Aboriginal caretakers of this land? And so I just love it. I'm not amazing at the pronunciation of the words, but I love doing it in front of my students to show them why it matters.
Yes.
We actually have a big book copy of that book in our school. So I literally bring the big book copy into an upper primary classroom because I want them to really immerse themselves in that message and see those words on the page, see them in and amongst those amazing illustrations and feel what it means to be a welcome to country that perhaps is something that happens at the start of your school assembly, but you don't really get the essence of why it matters. And so I just love that book. I think it's amazing, and everyone should have that book as a classroom book.
Auntie Joy Murphy and Lisa Kennedy.
Yes,
for that one. And Giselle, do you think that book really had... was that a book that prompted was it last year or the year before, your class making or writing their own acknowledgement?
It's all tied in there together in that I hadn't searched out a book to do this. We had been talking about what it means to have an acknowledgement of country and why that matters, and talking with our Aboriginal Community Education Officer at the school about that as well. I'd been to lots of different training events, and each time a different video was being shown at the beginning. So it all sort of happened for me in a couple of months, that I was seeing a lot of videos that had been produced that showed different acknowledgements to country from all around Australia. We were thinking about it from a school perspective of what we were doing in classrooms and in assembly. And then I saw this book, and it was that moment in time that it all hit together. And so I brought the book to the students, and we had the big book version, so that's the main way that I showed them. But it also exists as a hardcover and a paperback and a board book, so it's for everybody.
Yes.
There's all versions of the same book.
That's how important it is.
Oh,
yes.
so much. Yep. And so I brought that in to read with the students. We took a walk. Here in the hills, we're on Paramount land, so we took a walk and we talked about what that meant to be on country, and really immersed the students in it, from listening to people, viewing produced ones that were either welcomes from people for who it was their voice, or acknowledgements of groups who wanted to make a statement, and then had the students really craft what one could be. So they're taking phrases and words from other acknowledgements, or putting in words that they thought they needed to say. And yes, that's in the end how my class ended up writing their own acknowledgement of country that meant something personal and genuine whenever it was said from my students at some kind of event. So, and
Yes.
all tied in with a book that told it much better than I could, because it's a real authentic voice talking about why it mattered, and I can support it, but I don't have that deep connection of, I can understand why it's important, but I can't speak about it authentically. I needed someone's voice to do that for me, and that book is amazing for that.
Yes, it truly is. And hasn't it been wonderful that your students' voice, from their learning and understanding in response to or their thinking and talking about that book has been shared with, we've used that at workshops that we've run, it's just been so, I just think it's of such significance that your students have, their 12 and 13-year-old voices of their understanding of that can, can be the acknowledgement for the adults in the room at functions. I think that's, it's very powerful.
I think it really is, because that's why we're teaching. It's these generations that are coming through that are going to make the changes, that are going to make decisions, that are going to make policies going forward. It's all about bringing voices to them so that they can get those perspectives and start thinking about, well, how do I feel about this, and where do I sit, and are there injustices that I could be doing something about with the power of my words? And so it links that reading like a writer and writing like a reader that we've talked about, that bringing books that will give more voice than just mine, for them to see those perspectives, to ponder those perspectives, and to start making decisions and changes as they step forward into the world.
We might...
we're in good hands, Giselle. We're in the hands of books.
Yes.
And in bringing those to students, our students are in excellent hands when that's part of their everyday experience.
Yes, books for every day. That's right.
Thanks, guys. We might wrap it up there, but thanks, Giselle, for connecting to Tantalising Texts, to True Tasks, to... I don't know if we got onto transformative teaching. That's kind of the mini lesson side.
Another podcast.
Another podcast.
I think it was kind of hinted at around what we were talking about, transforming the way we do things. But yes, we didn't actually use that language. So
No, but another time. And Thinkers Talking, definitely we talked a lot about that. And I'm not sure we covered all your books, but they're all in the show notes. And you've also got a list here of picture books from another list, picture books for read aloud texts. That's a really great list as well. We'll put that in the show notes as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just ones that I've used with other classes or my own class, or talking about with other upper primary staff about books that sort of fit something they might be doing or fit where their students are at, so it might be a less helpful to others.
Yeah, I know how helpful it will be, Giselle, because not all schools have someone in their own school that they can ask about which books and where can I find, and so building some lists and building some, having people and classroom teachers talking about books they've used at the different year levels is so enriching for us all. And thank you for your generosity in talking about the books and like it was a trial, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say that's not generosity. It's more about we should get her to stop talking soon. Like, really, cut her off.
The other timeless too I'm trying to bring into podcasts, but I'm not very successful, is together. And but reading a picture book is all about having your kids together, isn't it, really?
It really is. I have so much, I'll be quick, but I have so much time that my students spend doing their independent reading. And I do ask them at the end, what are you reading? Is it good? But there is a disconnect because they're so in it, they don't really want to be interrupted often. The picture book is absolutely that shared experience, particularly read aloud, or someone's read it, they bring it over to me and I go, oh yes, look, let's read it again together. Because it's short enough to do that. It absolutely is for together. We should have, had that as the heading across the whole
it goes through everything. And
the
other
community.
The other thing I'd like to mention is an author and illustrator who started changed the way we looked at picture books entirely, passed away in May, Eric Carle, who wrote, one of his books was The Very Hungry Caterpillar, but just wanted to mention that because he was like the father of the huge changes in all these amazing directions that we're taking in picture books and how we're using them in the classroom. So thank you, Eric.
We have an audio book of his voice reading The Hungry Caterpillar.
Yes.
I've been a bit emotional the last week. My two kids.
Well, your children would. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we've always read the book with them, and Brown Bear with the illustrations, of course, and many of the others. But to have his voice actually read that as an audio book is just lovely. And he's got some funny inflections and things because of his accent. And so it's just beautiful. He's got a lovely, warm voice. But I haven't had a listen to it the last week. It's a bit, it's such a loss to our world of what he brought to picture books and our love of books.
And I love the wording. I think it's from the museum that
in Amherst in New York.
Wrote this.
Massachusetts.
In the light of the moon, holding onto a good star, a painter of rainbows is now travelling across the night sky.
Oh,
isn't that beautiful?
That is that sums it up, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. And thank you, Giselle, for all those wonderful insights. It's just helped teachers so much in being able to use more and more picture books in the classroom in upper primary. But, we're going to have to do younger years soon, I think, too.
Yes, but I know the other one that we didn't touch on, or the other area we didn't touch on today, which is definitely the next podcast, Giselle, and that's the informational books. Yes.
There's another one.
That's one you love. The last sort of year, that's what all my purchasing has been about. There's just this flood of amazing books coming out. So, sign me up for that.
Yes, yes. That's next.
Yes.
We'll do that one very soon because that's that's a magnificent. Like you said, it's a totally blossoming area. This new wave, really, of almost hybrid texts too.
Yes.
And a new way for us to think beyond information reports.
Yes.
Look, guys, I'm never going to wrap this up, but I'm going to try. Okay. Thank you so much, Giselle, and thank you, Sharon, and look forward to another podcast next week, and bye for now, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye, Giselle.
Bye, Giselle.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.